This is a story about taking your eye off the ball. That saying comes from sports. If you look away from the ball, even for 1 second, you might miss the catch and lose the game. It means you stopped paying attention to the most important thing. In this story, the ball is energy, the electricity that powers our homes, schools, phones, and computers. The two players are the United States and China. One of them is watching the ball closely. The other might be looking away. Since President Trump came to office the first time, he has been focused on one country more than any other. He has talked about the danger this country could be to America's money and America's safety. Can you guess which country? Did you say China? That's right. China. 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 He has said that name again and again. Here are some of the things President Trump has said over the years. He said, we were losing to China. He said, we want to beat China. He even said, we're leaving China. You can see the pattern. For President Trump, China is the big rival, the team he most wants to beat. He worries about two big things: the economy, which means jobs, money, and trade, and national security, which means keeping the country safe. Now President Trump is in his second term, and this time he has picked out one special area where America and China are racing against each other. That area is AI. What is AI? AI stands for artificial intelligence. It means computer programs that can seem to think, talk, and solve problems, almost like a person can. AI is one of the biggest new inventions in the world right now. But AI does not run on magic. It runs on special computer parts called chips, tiny pieces of technology that do the thinking inside a computer. The most powerful AI programs are called large language models, and they need thousands and thousands of the best chips to work. Whoever has the best chips can build the best AI. President Trump talked about this race. He said, China and other countries are racing to catch up to America, having to do with AI, and we're not going to let them do it. He also said, we have the great chips, we have the great everything, and we're going to be fighting them in a very friendly fashion. So America is working hard to protect its lead in the computer chip race. The United States wants to stay in first place. But here's the twist in our story. While America watches the chip race very closely, there's another contest going on at the same time. And in that other contest, America may be losing. What is this other contest? It is the race to make enough power. Not power like being strong or being the boss. Power like electricity. Here's why this matters. All that AI lives inside giant buildings called data centers. Huge buildings packed full of computers, row after row of them. These computers run all day and all night, and they are hungry, not for food, for electricity. One person in this story put it this way. It's fascinating because when you look at AI, there's a huge energy need for that, for the data centers. Think of it like this. America's AI and its amazing chips are like the fastest race car in the world, but a race car cannot run without fuel, and for AI, electricity is the fuel. No electricity means no data centers. No data centers means no AI. So the big question is simple. Does America have enough electricity to win the AI race? To answer that, we are going to hear from three people who know a lot about China. 2. What the experts see in China. The first person is named Hank Paulson. He is famous for a few reasons. He used to run a giant bank called Goldman Sachs, one of the biggest banks in the world. He was also the Treasury Secretary of the United States, the person in charge of the country's money, during a very scary time called the Great Financial Crisis, when banks were failing and people feared the whole economy would crash. He helped lead the country through it. He has also spent much of his career working on climate issues, and he knows China very well. More than 30 years ago, he helped lead Goldman Sachs into China. So when Hank Paulson talks about America, China, and energy, people listen. Hank Paulson started with some good news for America. He said, we have one big advantage on China, and that's it. We're energy independent, right? And they aren't. What does energy independent mean? It means America can make all the energy it needs by itself. It does not have to depend on other countries for fuel. China cannot say the same thing. China has to buy a lot of its fuel from other countries. So that is one point for America. But then came the bad news. Paulson said, we have a shortage of electricity in this country. The demand is much greater than the supply, and it's growing. Demand means how much electricity people want to use. Supply means how much electricity we can actually make. Right now in America, people want more electricity than the country can make, and the gap is growing. That is a shortage. Paulson said, we have a shortage of electricity to power data centers. What about China? Paulson said, China, on the other hand, they're investing massively in coal. Coal is an old fuel that causes a lot of pollution, and Paulson wishes China would spend its money on other things instead. But that is not all China is doing. Paulson said China is also investing big time in renewables and solar and wind. What are renewables? Renewables are kinds of energy that never run out. The sun keeps shining, so solar panels keep making electricity from sunlight. And the wind keeps blowing, so wind turbines keep making electricity from moving air. That is why we call them renewable. And here's a fact from Paulson that might surprise you. He said China has more renewables than Europe, the UK, the US combined. Read that again. Take all the renewable energy in Europe, add all of it in the United Kingdom, add all of it in the United States, and put it in one big pile. China's pile is still bigger. Paulson also said that China is going to have half their energy from renewables. Half! Imagine China's energy as a pizza cut into 2 equal pieces. One whole piece will come from things like the sun and the wind. Then Paulson made his point. So they've got plenty of electricity, he said. Meanwhile, in our country, utilities can't meet the demand. A utility is a company that makes electricity and sends it to your house through wires. In America, these companies cannot keep up with how much electricity people want. And when something is wanted by many people, but there is not enough of it, the price goes up. Paulson said electricity prices are spiking up. Spiking means shooting up fast, like a rocket. Who pays those higher prices? Regular people do. People who pay electric bills are called ratepayers. Paulson said, ratepayers are putting up their hands and saying no more. Families are tired of bigger and bigger electric bills. But at the very same time, Paulson said, we need the electricity for all those data centers. Then Paulson shared one more interesting fact. He said, if you look at the US, all of our electricity, essentially new electricity, the last couple of years has come from solar and wind. Think about that. Almost every bit of new electric power America has added in the last few years came from the sun and the wind. Those are the fastest things America can build right now. But here is the strange part. Paulson said, at the same time, the administration is restraining it. That means the government is holding back solar and wind, slowing them down instead of speeding them up. Paulson summed it all up like this. I would say that we are ahead of China when it comes to AI. They're investing massively. But I've got to tell you, the biggest potential drag we have is not having enough electricity to power our data centers. A drag is anything that slows you down, like running with a heavy backpack. Paulson is saying America is winning the AI race right now, but the electricity shortage is a heavy backpack on America's shoulders. Then someone asked him a hard question. Are we disadvantaging ourselves? That means, are we hurting our own team? China is divided into provinces, which are like states in America. Burns said, I visited 26 of the provinces, even out to the west. And what did he see from those train windows? He saw China building, 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 building. He said, the degree to which China is building transmission lines all across the country amazed him. Transmission lines are the huge power lines on tall towers that carry electricity from where it is made to where people need it. Think of them as highways for electricity. China is building these electric highways everywhere. Burns used a strong word to describe what he saw. He said it is staggering. Staggering means so surprising it almost knocks you over. He said it is staggering, the degree to which they're now controlling the global supply chain in electric vehicles, in lithium batteries, in solar panels and wind power. Let's unpack that. A supply chain is all the steps it takes to make something and get it to the store. Digging up materials, building parts, putting them together, and shipping the product. Burns is saying China now controls those steps worldwide for 4 big things. Electric vehicles, cars that run on batteries instead of gas, lithium batteries, solar panels, and wind power. Burns said they are the world leaders in this. Then he said what he thinks America should do. I think that the United States should be making a similar effort. Maybe it's not as cost-effective now, but we have to think out to the 2030s and 2040s. He means America should not only think about today or this year. America should think about 10 years from now and 20 years from now. Sometimes something costs more money today, but pays off big in the future. Burns finished with a thought about the whole relationship between the two countries. He said, as we consider this big challenge of how do we compete with China and yet not get into a war with China, we have to start planning more long-term, as they are doing. Did you catch those last 4 words? As they are doing. China is already planning far into the future. Burns believes America needs to do the same. Maybe you are thinking, okay, these are just opinions. 2 people looked at China and came away impressed. But what do the numbers say? Well, the numbers back up exactly what Hank Paulson and Nick Burns saw on the ground. Here's the first number, and it is a big one. Since 2021, in just 5 short years, China has added more power capacity across all kinds of energy than the United States has built in its entire history. Stop and think about that. The United States has been building power plants for more than 100 years. Every dam, coal plant, gas plant, nuclear plant, wind farm, and solar farm, all of it added up. China built more than that total in just 5 years. And the gap is only growing. Here is the second big number. Over the next 5 years, China plans to add more than 3.4 terawatts of energy generation capacity. A terawatt is a way to measure a gigantic amount of power. All you need to know is this: 3.4 terawatts is nearly 6 times as much as the United States plans to add. For every 1 block of power America stacks, China stacks 6. One expert put it simply: they've been developing their electric grid at a rate that is extraordinary. The grid is the whole giant system of power plants and wires that brings electricity to everyone. And extraordinary means far beyond normal. 3. China's big bet and America's pullback. That expert is the third person in our story, Elizabeth Economy. Yes, that really is her last name. And she studies the economy of China. She is a China policy expert and a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, a famous place where researchers study big world problems. She says there will be a high cost if America falls farther behind. China has made a big bet on renewables and clean energy more broadly, she said. Clean energy means energy that does not pollute the air, like solar and wind. Then she shared a milestone. A milestone is a moment that marks a big change. She said that this past year, for the very first time, China has more power generation capacity in clean energy than it does in fossil fuel energy. Fossil fuels are the old fuels: coal, oil, and natural gas. They are dug or pumped out of the ground, and they pollute when they burn. For years and years, China made most of its power from fossil fuels, especially coal. But now, for the first time ever, China's clean energy capacity is bigger than its fossil fuel capacity. The scales have tipped. And China is not alone. Economy said, the Europeans are following suit. That means Europe is going the same way, building more clean energy. But America? Economy said, we clearly are moving in the opposite direction, sort of all in on fossil fuels. While China and Europe bet on clean energy, America is betting on the old fuels. Now, here's the part of Elizabeth Economy's message that might surprise you. She says, China is not doing this just to be nice to the planet. She said, it's important to understand that the bet from the Chinese side is not necessarily just about the health of the Chinese people or the Chinese environment. This is a real economic play for them. An economic play means a move you make to win money, and the money here is enormous. Economy explained, they are cognizant of the fact that by 2035, the clean energy market is estimated to be globally as big as $7 trillion, and they want to command that market. $7 trillion. A trillion is 1,000 billions. That is how big the world's clean energy market is expected to be by 2035, and China wants to command it, to be the boss of it. So China has been spending money, a lot of money. Economy said that last year alone, China put $1 trillion into renewable investments. $1 trillion in a single year. And is the plan working? Look at what happened to China's exports. Exports are things a country makes and sells to other countries. In 2025, China's exports of electric vehicles skyrocketed. They went up 80%. Battery exports went up 40%. Solar panel exports went up 20%. The economy summed it up with a clever line: for the Chinese, as they look out, clean energy is green, right? It's green for the environment, and it's green for money. Get it? Green has 2 meanings. Green like grass and trees and clean air, and green like the color of dollar bills. For China, clean energy is both kinds of green at once. It helps the planet and it makes money. That is why she called it a real moneymaker. In the interview, someone made an interesting point to Elizabeth Economy. They said that China's clean energy push has been going on for several years. President Xi, the leader of China, did not just wake up yesterday and say, let's have a lot of renewables for AI. It started way before the big push for AI. So the question was, how much of this is pure commerce, just business, rather than a race for AI? Elizabeth Economy agreed completely. In fact, she said something surprising. I think AI is very late to the game. Late to the game? She means China started working on renewables long before AI became a big deal. She said the Chinese began with renewables beginning in the late 1980s, early 1990s. That is more than 30 years ago. Back then, Economy explained, China was already inviting Western firms in for wind turbines and solar panels. Western firms means companies from places like America and Europe. China made those companies a deal. Sure, we'll give you access to the Chinese market. Now you just give us some of your advanced technology or set up an R&D center. In other words, China said, you can sell to our gigantic market, but in return you must share your technology secrets or build a research lab. That is what R&D means, research and development here in China. And economy added one more thing. She said, sometimes China might just illegally appropriate the technology. That is a careful way of saying that sometimes China simply took the technology without permission. Taking something that is not yours without asking is stealing, and she says that happened too. Year after year, plan after plan, China kept at it. China runs its country using 5-year plans, big roadmaps that say what the country will build over the next 5 years. Economy said that one 5-year plan after another, renewables have been part of the Chinese plan. So she agreed with the questioner. Exactly. Xi Jinping did not wake up one day and say, oh, this really matters. China had been building toward this for decades. Here's the twist, though. Even if China's renewable push was never meant for AI, that is exactly where it could matter most. Why does China's energy edge matter most for AI? Because in the United States, the hunger for power is exploding. Here is a number to hold on to. The electricity used by data centers alone in America is expected to triple by 2035. Triple means 3 times as much. That puts even more pressure on the American grid, which is already under strain, like a backpack that is already stuffed full, and someone wants to shove in 3 times more books. You might think America would race to close the gap by building renewable energy as fast as possible. Solar and wind, after all, are the fastest new power America has been adding. But instead, the US is pulling back from that whole sector, the very sector China increasingly dominates. How much does China dominate it? Here are the numbers. China accounts for roughly 80% of global technology production in solar and battery technology. That means if you took all the solar and battery tech made in the whole world, about 8 out of every 10 pieces come from China. And in wind, China makes more than 70%, more than 7 out of every 10. So the world's clean energy machines are mostly made in one place, China. Of course, this enormous buildup of renewables in China did not come free. China had to spend money, mountains of money. So the interviewer asked Elizabeth Economy some sharp questions. If the United States wanted to get back in this game and compete on renewables, could it? How much money are we talking about? How much has the Chinese government really spent? Economy answered, at this point, it's easily over $1 trillion. It's been billions of dollars every year. And as she mentioned before, it was $1 trillion just last year in clean energy investment. Then she said something that might be hard to hear if you are an American. There's not a way that we're going to compete across this spectrum of technologies. Solar, wind, nuclear. We're just not going to be able to do that at this point. In other words, America cannot catch up everywhere at once. The race across the whole board, solar and wind and nuclear all together, has gotten too far ahead. Want proof? Compare the exports. China's clean energy exports were worth about $76 billion last year. America's? Somewhere around $3 to $4 billion. Line those up. 76 versus 3 or 4. Economy also reminded everyone of size. Don't forget, she said, they're also a country of 1.4 billion people, so roughly 3.5, 4 times as large as we are. More people means more workers, more factories, and more capacity to build things. So is it hopeless? Not exactly. The interviewer asked, could we get back in the game? Elizabeth Economy pointed to something America already tried. She said, I think that was the point of the Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act was a law passed when President Biden was in office. What did it do? Economy explained, it was a mix of subsidies and tax incentives. Those are too many words worth learning. A subsidy is when the government helps pay for something it wants more of, like helping a company pay to build a solar panel factory. A tax incentive means the government lets you keep more of your money if you do a certain thing, like building clean energy. Both are ways a government says, build this and we will make it worth your while. Did it work? Economy said the law attracted an enormous amount of foreign investment. Companies from other countries started putting big money into building things in America. She said the law had a lot of potential to reboot the clean energy sector in the United States. Reboot. Like restarting a frozen computer so it runs fresh again. But then things changed. Economy said the Trump administration is not that interested in clean energy and the renewable sector. And so, she said, we saw that they rolled back probably 95% of the Inflation Reduction Act. Rolled back means undone, canceled. If the law were a 100-piece puzzle, 95 of the pieces were taken off the table. Then came another smart question. If the government will not help with subsidies or tax breaks, can the free market fix this on its own? In other words, maybe companies will build renewables anyway, simply because it is becoming the cheaper way to make energy. Is it possible the market will just take over? Elizabeth Economy's answer was, it is not that easy. She said, there's always a hurdle, right? When you're introducing a new technology, you have to get over it. Every brand new technology faces a hurdle at the start. It is expensive at first, even if it will be cheaper later, and many good ideas die at that hurdle. Economy said, that is where the government's subsidies or incentives can play an important role. The government's help is like a boost that gets the runner over the hurdle. She pointed out that the Trump administration already understands this in a different area. She said, we see that now with rare earths. Rare earths are special metals found in the ground, needed for phones, magnets, and batteries. Economy said, I think the Trump administration has come around to appreciate that if you're going to compete with China, you're going to have to adopt some elements of their playbook. A playbook is a team's book of plans and strategies. China's playbook says the government must invest money, and the government must make sure there is a secure market, a safe, steady place to sell the new technology. Economy described the whole journey a new technology has to take. You have to get it over the hurdle from the innovation, to the manufacturing, to the deployment and export. That is the full life cycle. First, innovation, inventing the thing. Second, manufacturing, building the thing in factories. Third, deployment, putting the thing to work in the real world. Fourth, export, selling the thing to other countries. China, she said, has created its playbook for that entire life cycle. In America, we don't really have a playbook that can compete without a little more government intervention than we've typically been comfortable with. That last part is important. Americans usually like the government to stay out of business. But Economy is saying that to compete with China on this, the American government may have to step in more than Americans are used to. 4. One place. They might agree. AI safety. So far, this story has been all about competition. America versus China. Race, race, race. But the story ends on a different note. There's at least one area where these two rivals might find common ground. A place where they agree. That place is AI safety. Both countries are building extremely powerful AI, and powerful things can be dangerous without rules. Cars are useful, but we still need speed limits and seatbelts. AI may need its own version of those rules, and rules work best when everyone follows them. So someone asked, do we need to work with China on safety for AI? The answer, yeah, obviously we do, at some time. But right now they're an adversary when it comes to military and security. An adversary is an opponent, someone on the other side. So the thinking goes, yes, we will need to work together on AI safety eventually, but it is complicated because China is our opponent in military matters right now. The answer continued, I think we're going to be forced to do it when we start seeing accidents and bad things happen. And I just want to make sure we're in the lead when we get to that point. I really do. In other words, someday an AI accident will happen somewhere, something will go wrong, and that will push the two countries to sit down and make safety rules together. When that day comes, America wants to be in the lead. Hank Paulson took it a step further. He talked about the moment when President Trump and President Xi meet. He said, when President Trump and Xi meet, it's going to be the first of, I hope, 4 summit meetings. A summit meeting is when the leaders of countries meet face to face to talk about the biggest issues. Then Paulson said something clever about 2 kinds of deficits. He said, right now we've got a trade deficit, but we've got a trust deficit. Big. A trade deficit is when your country buys more from another country than it sells to them. A trust deficit is when 2 sides do not believe in each other. Paulson said, I want to close that trust deficit because we need to figure out how we can compete and work together at the same time. Like 2 classmates who both want to win the science fair but still team up to keep the lab safe. Rivals in one thing, partners in another. Paulson gave a warning about what happens if the 2 countries fail. If we don't, the world is going to be a much more dangerous and less prosperous place. Prosperous means doing well, with plenty of money and success. So a world where America and China cannot work together is a poorer, scarier world for everyone. But Paulson ended with hope. He said, I view as a positive. I really do believe President Trump wants to find a way to work with China, and I hope that the Chinese feel the same way. Let's put it all together, nice and simple. America and China are big rivals, and the biggest race between them is AI. America leads that race today. It has the great chips. But AI runs on electricity, and America is running short. Demand is bigger than supply, prices are spiking, and ratepayers are saying no more. Almost all of America's new electricity in the last couple of years has come from solar and wind. Yet the government is holding solar and wind back. Meanwhile, since 2021, China has added more power capacity in 5 years than America built in its whole history, and it plans to add nearly 6 times more than America over the next 5 years. China spent over $1 trillion because it sees a $7 trillion clean energy market coming by 2035 and wants to command it. America tried to answer with the Inflation Reduction Act, but about 95% of it was rolled back. And yet, the story does not have to end in a fight. On AI safety, the two rivals may one day work together. As Hank Paulson said, they need to close the trust deficit, to compete and cooperate at the same time. If they don't, the world becomes more dangerous and less prosperous for everyone. The lesson is the one we started with. In any big game, you have to watch the ball. America is watching the chips. But the ball that matters just as much, the energy, may be the one rolling away. The question is whether America will look down in time to catch it.